Hey folks, as you can see, I'm wearing a jacket outside. Fall is clearly descending upon Albuquerque because I'm no longer able to just run around outside with a t-shirt on. That's only about a week old or so, that condition, but it's taking hold. The season is changing. And I started a book today, which it was recommended to me by Madeline, who actually studied with the man who wrote the book. He's a Tibetan teacher. I think he passed away in the 80s. His name is Chögyam Trungpa, and I had about an hour or so when I was commuting and listened to a little over an hour, I guess, of the book, and oh my God, it's kind of blowing my mind. It's called The Sacred Way of the Warrior by Chögyam Trungpa, Tibetan Buddhist teacher. And it's striking me on so many levels because it's both so penetratingly deep and so remarkably deeply kind of transcendent, and at the same time so ho-hum and affirming of everyday life. You know, he talks about how we want to become aware of and connected to, and as a sort of first step, we want to become aware of the sort of mundane experiences of our life, like literally looking at our fork, our plates, our table, our house, just starting with the stuff that we interact with every day. And I love that, you know, it sort of evoked for me a sense of like, this is a path that is not esoteric. It's not about distancing ourselves from the world. It's not about going into a monastery and becoming a disciple of anything. It's about starting with the very most concrete elements of our own surroundings and connecting deeply with them and then through them. There were any number of principles that came through today, and I think it's really interesting to me that I'm finding this sort of right after the point, or right at the time in my life when I've kind of unlocked for myself this notion of creative spirituality, this notion that the creative process can be a spiritual practice, because it's also related. It's essentially that. I mean, Madeline the other day, when I was talking about this a little bit to her in our lesson, she said something like, she was agreeing with me, and she said something like, yeah, it's just the path of being a human being. And I realized, oh wow, it's like the level of universality keeps coming through as a new revelation, which you'd think that would be obvious. You know, you'd think that it would be obvious that every human being is on this path. And yet, as I articulate the path and as I become more conscious of it for myself, I keep recognizing stages I recognize in stages the fact that there's this underlying universality and this kind of pan-human experience. The archetypal sort of unfolding that I talk about that occurs in the creative process, and that also occurs in various lineage traditions, of course, course, the substrate to that is just the human psyche. It's just what it means to be human. And, you know, it's so obvious. How could it be any other way? But at the same time, when that lands, when that realization really lands with me, it always feels like a revelation. It always feels like something profound, like I'm realizing something profound about the nature of all of our connectedness to reality and all of our journey psychically, spiritually, through reality. One of the lines that I loved today from the book was where he talked about, he said, the whole sort of intro to the book is all around this idea of basic goodness, the basic goodness of our being as human beings, and talks about how, like, our basic goodness is the fact that the universe is essentially good. It's good in the sense of, it's not good as opposed to bad. It's good in the sense of there can be no quarrel with the fundamental aspects of our being. In other words, we can never be in a quarrel with having ears and eyes and skin and bodies. But that's not something that we can quarrel with. That's the fundamental, these are the fundamental gifts of existence, gifts of human life. Within those, within the mind, within the constructed reality, we can of course quarrel with things, and we do all the time. Our mind wants some things and not others. We reject some things, we gravitate towards others. We become addicted to some things and we become averse to others. But there can be no quarrel with this foundation of goodness that we all possess. And he said something like, oftentimes when we become aware of our own basic goodness, we take the experience way too seriously. And it reminded me of something that another great philosopher that I've admired and studied for some time, Ken Wilber, has said, which is that when we have a profound spiritual experience, it's interesting to notice where we are in the stages of unfolding, because a powerful spiritual experience can actually have the perverse, ironic effect of cementing our biases if it comes to us in a certain way, because it can affirm, yes, I do have the key to the kingdom, and it is this, rest of humanity, now I know. It can sort of empower, because we connect with this undeniable, powerful, infinite source. We're still filtering it. That experience doesn't just happen in a vacuum. If we come from a Christian tradition or a Buddhist tradition or a Hindu tradition or a Muslim tradition or a Native American tradition, or any of the paths we might have walked as humans, and then they culminate in this, or we just somewhere along the way we have this powerful experience, we're going to frame it and we're going to interpret it, and there may even be visual elements that we compose to manifest the experience in our psyche. And if the effect of the experience is to entrench us in that particular version, then a spiritual experience can almost be a force to be, it can be dangerous. It can be something that actually sort of turns on us and like almost like anchors us more deeply into a sort of fixed position. And when Chögyam Trungpa today in the book said that line about when we first have the experience of our basic goodness, we tend to take the experience far too seriously. That's what kind of came through for me. I was like, oh yeah. And funny enough, I connect this to my own spiritual experiences and my own, one of the things I'm experiencing with this cabaret is the things that come to me that when I'm just thinking about, when I'm just being playful, when I'm following my rule, if I'm only allowed to have fun, creating ideas for the cabaret, what shows up is play. What shows up is light. What shows up is this game, this beautiful delight. My friend Ruth called it delight the other day. It was a perfect term. And it's actually the term that Chögyam Trungpa also used in the book, delight. But then when it comes time to perform the cabaret, all of a sudden, there's this seriousness that comes in. There's this like, okay, now I shall deliver the beautiful things I've experienced. And it's like, it's an unconscious tilting into seriousness that doesn't serve the material. It doesn't do it. It's not what I want to be doing, but it's kind of what happens. I get taken over by this seriousness, and I know it's kind of a scattershot look at all of that, but what I'm seeing in it is a real reflection of something that I've also experienced, which is this notion, what as we have these spiritual experiences, what Chögyam Trungpa is saying is what we need is a sense of humor. What we need, what we want to have about it is a sense of humor, like letting he beautifully articulates why we want to keep looking back, even after we've become somewhat liberated from our fears or our patterns or our past. He says it's a really good idea to keep looking back at the past and seeing what's there. Because otherwise we can get free. We can think that we're free of all of that, and then we just kind of revel in the blissfulness of the freedom from it. But what he talks about over and over again, which I find so beautiful, is that there's a softness in our heart. There's a kind of inherent sadness, not a sadness in the sense of something has been imposed upon me, or I'm lacking in some way, but a sadness that is just the softness of the human heart in relationship to the state of the world. It's a natural state of sadness, and a deeply beautiful state of sadness. He calls it a prerequisite to being a warrior. You can't be a warrior unless this sadness is part of you, because it anchors our courage. It grounds everything. And clocking that and becoming really okay with that sadness, not running from it, not trying to turn it into anything else or explain it away. That just feels so big to me right now. It feels so much like where my focus wants to go with all the work I'm doing, whether it's music, whether it's this cabaret, whether it's my teaching, whether it's whatever it is. Remembering that we're serving a world that needs us. And that's where the beauty is going to come from that softness in us. Not necessarily from having the key to the kingdom or whatever. So that's where I am today, people. Thank you. I love you. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.